Hi everyone. I hope that's working. It says I'm live. I'm sorry, I've been having some problems here getting it to work. I'm keeping fingers crossed that it is working, but it looks like it is at last. Sorry to keep you waiting there, but I thought I'd been on for about 5 minutes now, but I haven't. Anyway, this feels like a very strange and novel thing to be doing, to be talking to you all remotely with nobody here at all. Anyway, I hope you're all well. I'm here at home, keeping well so far, and hopefully we won't have any further technological disturbances. I'm sure my fault, I'm sure something I've done wrong. And we may, of course, be disturbed when my wife and my two boys are currently in the park having their daily exercise, come back in at any moment. If you're watching this and have any questions you've not already sent, I'm keeping one eye on my inbox over here, and that's at info@oxfordleader.co.uk. So do send me any questions or any comments if you like, and I'll try and pass on what I can. I hope that you've really enjoyed the week of social DistanSong. I take no credit, by the way, for the brilliant title, which was entirely my colleague Roya's invention. It was a very last minute thing, of course, to do that. It's been a learning curve for all of us, but I think it's come out well. The response seems to have been good, and I'm so grateful to all the artists and the speakers who have put things together at extremely short notice. Before we go on at all, I'd also just like to say thanks again to all of you who were willing to contribute the cost of your tickets to Spring Song and convert those to donations so that we could make sure that we paid our artists a decent chunk, at least 50% of their fee. And that has been quite an amazing response, I must say, we've had. And we're definitely going to be able to pay at least that. The dust is still settling, but people have been so grateful for that, artists as well. And speaking for myself, I've obviously had a huge swathe of work now cancelled right through to September already. People are cancelling, and it's people are so grateful for us making that gesture of being able to support them. Sadly, not happening all that much, although there are some heartwarming stories out there. So with your support, we've not taken too much of a hit, and I can say that we're still planning with confidence for the future and not damaged too much by this. So thank you again for that. So a few questions have come in already. I'll mention people if I do at all by first name only. But there was one from Ruth who asked, she needs a bit more time with the things that we've posted on the website this week that she's enjoyed, and will they remain available on your website? Well, the answer to that is we're going to keep that under review a bit. We'll certainly leave them there for a bit, and I imagine we'll leave them there until this whole home restriction is lifted, after which point we'll discuss it with the people who contributed, of course, and perhaps we will leave the study events. I could imagine the talks and study events hopefully staying there. I think those have a bit more longevity. I think some of the songs you've heard are probably not recorded for posterity, and we'll come on to that in just a moment. There's been some very interesting things there. So we might take those down, I could imagine, shortly after restrictions are lifted and the current crisis is over. But yes, we'll be leaving them there for now, and we'll probably try and be a bit more organised, put them all on one page in a playlist on YouTube and that sort of thing. So several people have asked me how the recordings have worked, how the remotely recorded recordings have been able to happen and be so synchronized as well. And it's not a trade secret. I'm perfectly happy to tell you what we did, and I hope it won't be I hope it won't spoil an illusion or anything. So I think my favorite one was the one I did with Christina, where she was out in the mountains in Austria at home and doing the Mahler song. It couldn't have been a more apt setting, and me and my little piano hut at the end of the garden here in Oxford. And so I record the piano part. This is how I've done it, and I think most other people, certainly everyone who's contributed to us, and I think many other people doing it online as well. How I've done it is I record the piano part, and I obviously try and keep Christina's line in my head. I try and hear all the words, which I usually have there performed for me and I'm just listening to. So I try and imagine them, try and keep a handle on the shape that I know Christina would want it to have. In that particular case, I sent off the recording to her, and in that particular case, she made one request for a corner that wasn't quite as she had imagined it. So I then did another another take of it. I did quite a few takes actually before I got a single take that I was happy with, and sent it back. You'll see she listened on headphones with another device, not her own phone, or I don't know which way around she did it, but she needed two devices, and one of them she listened to the recording that I had sent her, and the other she recorded herself singing along, listening in one ear and singing along, and she then sent the audio file back to me, and I put it into iMovie, which is not a program I've used very much before, but I've become surprisingly proficient over the course of this week in editing a lot of these films. So I then splice it together. It's amazing what you can do very easily, and try and find a perfect synchronicity of the sound, and layer the films together and put them side by side. So we're not actually doing it at all at the same time. In fact, I think I recorded my spring morning song quite late at night, but Christina did in fact record it on a spring morning in Austria. So that's how we did that. I'm sure there may be better ways in the future of doing it, but you'll notice, of course, sometimes it's not perfectly together. It's basically in sync, most of it is, and just once or twice, everybody, I think, comes very slightly apart. But nevertheless, I think there's a real responsiveness in there, which has meant it's perfectly possible for that to work, and it's actually been very enjoyable to do. So I had two other questions about the use of technology more generally and what that's thrown up this week. And Terry very kindly wrote that social DistanSong has been marvellous, and it seems to me that using the new technology to spread the word about Leader in this way might be something to continue when the crisis ends. Not a substitute for live performance, but a good way of keeping in contact with audiences and spreading the word. Any comments from your side? Well, yes, a few. Some of you may know that we are co-hosting, or co-supervising rather, Stuart Campbell's PhD at the moment. In fact, he did one of the films earlier in the week, which if you've not watched, I hope you might be interested to go and see. And he's really exploring audience experience of song recitals and what that means to different people. And one of the things that's come out of that very clearly from all his questionnaires and interviews is people really want to get to know artists. And we've, of course, we're always delighted if people want to talk in their concerts and introduce things. That's fine and great. But some people don't like to do that. And I think actually what we've discovered is this is a really easy and immediate way to do it. The use of Zoom. Nobody had ever even heard of Zoom, I think. Well, I certainly hadn't anyway. Most of our artists hadn't before this week, but suddenly we're all using it for social evenings with our friends and online lessons. I know people are using it for as well, but also, of course, for these interviews that we did. I did the conversation with Dorothea Lang and Julia Strake, and Katie Hamilton did a couple with Benjamin Apple and with Robin Tritchler as well. And I think that's a great way of just showing people at home, like we're doing now, and an opportunity for people to get to know the artist. So I think that's a really positive thing, that perhaps we can invite people to contribute these kind of films before their concerts in October. I don't think we wouldn't be the first people to do it, but I think on a bigger scale, and now we know how easy it is to do. And I think also on our website, as you know, we also now have this explore section with all the texts and translations. But I think some of the artists have given real insight into the programs they were due to perform. And I think people, in a way, when they come to song recitals, maybe more than other classical music forms, maybe more than string quartets and the like, or piano recitals, people like to brush up before they come. I think in the way that if you're going to see some Shakespeare in Stratford, you might want to brush up on the play that you're going to see, because you know that you won't catch every word and every nuance straight away if you're not terribly familiar with it already. And I think people enjoy that with song performances as well. And so I guess having that interaction from performers and that introduction from performers, I think could be very valuable for people. So that's certainly something that we want to use more. And I hope that the other benefit that will come out of this week will be that a lot of our audience, I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect have been pushed during this period into using the idea of technology as a way of receiving art for the first time during this house arrest. We're all having to spend lots of time at home, and it's the only way that we can get music in this way and get this engagement. So obviously that's never going to replace live music, but hopefully there's a bit of a precedent there for people being more open to the idea of engaging with online activity for their musical experiences, which I think perhaps classical music audiences have not been famously receptive to thus far. Of course, there's also the fact that we can engage people further afield. So the manifold advantages in that respect as well. So following on from that, also had a question from Laura, who points out the festival uses so many different types of venue already, all of which add something to the experience of listening and performing. It's inevitable that we think of making music online as less satisfactory, but are there things that you do gain from doing things remotely? I thought it was very interesting, actually. I suppose in a way, the songs that we've recorded feel like a kind of compromise. They're definitely, as I said, the way that we record them, it's not so spontaneous. It's definitely not the same in any way as being in the room with somebody and doing it together at the same time. But yes, there have been some really interesting things that have come out of it that made us think. And first of all, I'm sure there's a study day somewhere after all of this is over. There's going to be a study day in there on the idea of the singer as accompanist. So the idea that we, the accompanists, are recording what we hear and what we perceive, and then sending that off to the singer, who has to listen and respond without our underlying flexibility. And I think that this role of accompanist is much more is much deeper and more flexible than people realize. I think it's not just accompanying; it's very much a partnership, as I'm sure many of you know and think anyway. But there is something interesting in that for myself, and I know for quite a few other pianists that I've spoken to or read commenting on this. One of the things I find is that without the vowel sounds and the consonants, but I think it's particularly the vowel sounds actually present for us, actually there being heard in that moment, it's very, very easy to hear them a little bit quicker in your head than in reality. And so almost all of the things that I've recorded and sent off, I've just found to be just a shade hurried. I've just found myself hurrying the singer a little bit, which I don't think is something that I usually do. And I don't not do that rather as the result of endless rehearsals with somebody. It tends to be very immediate, very instinctive when we sit down in the room together. We have our very first rehearsal, even if we've never met before. Most of those adjustments will be made microscopically and instantly. When I think I can hear how someone would do that, so I prepare for it, and then not. Certainly that's in the case with Christina. We had already had at least one rehearsal. So I had a pretty shrewd idea of how she wanted it to go, and I really had that in my head. But then, no, there were a few things where I was just a little bit ahead, and I think I don't mind saying that you can hear that in Wer hat dies Liedlein erdacht? I think you can hear that I'm slightly pushing until the very end where I don't quite catch Christina's tempo. Anyway, so I'm not really answering Laura's question anymore, but I think, as I say, that's something really interesting that's come out of it for me, and how I wonder whether singers afterwards will have any comments on listening in that way. I think all of the song singers that we value and respect, all of them listen. They're all flexible. This is always a flexible partnership. We're always back and forth and listening to each other and responding in the moment to each other. But I think it will inevitably be a different kind of listening for them, and a different experience for me and for us as accompanists. So yeah, it'll be interesting to explore that afterwards. And I suppose the other thing I was wondering, I think we all sometimes feel, all of us performers sometimes feel that the very best things that we do sometimes happen in private when no one else is listening. And of course, in recordings, you have endless chances to get it right and do it again and again and find the interpretation that you're most happy with, and make sure that it's just fundamentally correct as well. But you're always aware that there's at least 4 other ears, often 6 or more, they're listening, criticizing as well. And of course, that's positive. They're giving you constructive feedback and helping you. But I think sometimes sitting in my studio by myself, where the very best things come out, and I've not yet found a way of feeling comfortable knowing that there's a camera rolling there. But I could imagine that if we did it a lot, that would happen. And I think sometimes one might hope to capture the very best of one's playing, even if the recording is a little bit substandard. I think one of the things some of us are going to be doing is rushing out and buying new equipment for all of this. Particularly microphones, particularly the audio is tricky to capture really well. And yes, I think that's something one might hope for. I just thought of something else I wanted to say in answer to that question, but it's gone, I'm afraid. So I had another question from Mark, which was, my question for Sholto would be, which song in the entire leader repertoire do you most dread? As a pianist, that is, what do you most dread singers including on their programme? And I think everyone would think that I would say this, but I will say it, it's Kynoch. I've recorded it. You can watch our recording on YouTube. I have played it in concert a number of times, and I just find it impossible. I dread having to play it. No matter how many tricks you have up your sleeve for it, and everyone has tricks, it's still daunting and intimidating to play. So that's a single easy answer there. So Sarah has an interesting question about singers performing from memory. Listening to this wonderful repertoire, I'm all too often frustrated because the singers do not sing from memory. It makes such a difference to the performance when they do, and I feel that you are in a unique position to give Lieder the same attention that is given to opera. Is there any way that you can make this possible? Could we write it into our contracts that singers must perform from memory? I think the answer, sadly, is no. By and large, I agree that there is something special about singers performing from memory. I personally loathe memorizing music, and I'm terrible at it, and I find it becomes the only thing I can think about on the very rare occasions I've done it, at least since being a student. So I have huge respect for people that can memorize reams of music. Singers obviously have to. For their opera performances, it's simply not an option. But I am also sympathetic to people who don't all the time. And I think one of the major problems in the classical music world, for all sorts of reasons today, is that there's not enough money in the business, and people aren't being paid enough. And so people are having to do a huge amount of work. There's also not a kind of network of promoters who are willing to simply accept the same program from people that they're doing everywhere else. And I would definitely could stand accused of that at Oxford Leader. We're constantly asking people to curate and create programs for us, for our themed programs, which I think makes for a richer overall festival. I hope you all agree. But it does mean we're asking people to learn a lot. People are not making huge sums of money. A vast amount of work goes into preparing a song recital in particular. I would say more arguably than an operatic role. Certainly there's by minutes, if you do an hour and 20 minutes, there are very, very few operatic roles where you have to do that. An actual hour and 20 minutes of one person having to sing is very, very rare. They're also not bouncing off other people in quite the same way. They haven't got a conductor to give them entries, and they haven't got a long preparation period with a whole team of people behind them, music calls and endless rehearsals, and people drilling the music into them. There's none of that support in the song world, of course, as there is in the opera. So I think it's much harder to get music embedded in that way. Of course, the best singers, the dedicated song singers put that enormous amount of work into song singing. But coming back to my point about there not being enough money and people not being paid enough per event, that they do means that everybody is rushing from one thing to the next. I wonder how many of us are going to rethink that after this period of seclusion, whether we want to carry on racing about all the time. But I'm sure you know, anecdotally at least, from many musicians, that people just are frantically busy. The most successful musicians are frantically busy. Agents are also pushing people to do huge amounts of work, and it's sometimes just not feasible to have the time to memorize, which is this vastly time-consuming thing. So I suppose for me it's more about how people approach it. And I think, if someone is coming to us for the first time and they really haven't learned the music and they're ahead in the copy, well, that's a different thing. I might forgive it once. The second time, though, if it happened again, that's then it's no further invitations coming in the near future. But of course, people also use the scores very unobtrusively, and I can think of a couple of great singers amongst the very favourite singers who come to the festival each year, and they do use the score, but they generally have it either very low or very unobtrusive off to the side. Often they barely look at it. You could go a whole evening and not see them glance at it. And I think in that case, I don't find it obtrusive at all. I don't mind them having that there as a kind of sense of security that it gives as a prop almost. That for me is absolutely fine. And so if people are using the score just to make absolutely certain that they feel confident and they don't have to worry about it and they can give their all to the performance, that for me is vastly preferable to somebody coming out and going terribly wrong and making reams of mistakes. Or in fact, even worse than that, I think going wrong is fine, but worse than that, being concerned about it and not able to give their all to the performance. And I think I've had some backstage experiences of that I would say. I sometimes have been in the green room with singers, and I think one of the things I remember reading Gerald Moore's "Am I Too Loud," which I guess I have fairly mixed feelings about, but as a young accompanist reading it, there were definitely some lessons to take, and one of them was that no matter how you are feeling before you walk on stage as an accompanist, you need to be a bedrock of calm and making sure that everybody feels, that your singer rather feels at ease and is not worried about you worrying. And I think that is a useful lesson to learn. And so when a singer is saying just before going on stage, "Oh, should I use the copy? Should I take it with me? Or should I think I know it. Oh, should I take it on stage?" I'm sort of loath to say anything because I don't want to be in a position where I'm encouraging either way. I just want to be a kind of support for their own decision. But I'm always thinking, please take the score with you. Please take the score with you. Because I know that if they go on stage and I know that they're not quite confident, but they're singing it from memory, my concern is constantly that they will take a wrong turn. And of course, part of my job will be to save that. And we all do that sometimes. And I hope most of the time you're totally unaware of it. But there are occasions where that happens. And I would much, much rather a singer walked on with the score and sang confidently and well and engaged and was able to communicate with the audience than went on stage just worried. So that's my take on that, I guess. Had some Schubert-related questions from Jenny, who asks, our family very much enjoyed the Schubert year in 2014. Are there plans to hold another Lieder Festival dedicated to Schubert? Yes, there are. There'll be a lot of Schubert next year. It's our 20th anniversary, and I guess, just on a personal note, I wouldn't plan a 20th anniversary celebration without a lot of Schubert. And we're going to be announcing the kind of theme of that quite soon, probably, but I don't think it's too early for me to mention that it's going to be a strong element of song as a kind of social art form and friendship in song. And this is in the 2021 festival, October 21, which will be our 20th. And I think the original Schubertiade and the music of Schubert generally is inevitably going to play a very large part in that. So yes, that's in the immediate future. I mean, every festival will have lots of Schubert in it. And then, of course, 2024, it's a long way away still, but we're already thinking to there. 2024 will be 10 years since our Schubert project, and I sort of feel, given what a momentous event that was for us and for me personally, I'd like to mark that. But then, of course, just 4 years after that, in 2028, of course, it'll be the bicentenary of Schubert's death. I imagine a lot of people will be doing a lot of Schubert then, although I don't think any of us are planning it in great detail just yet. I'm certainly not, but I'm sure we'll be doing more then. And I could sort of imagine some kind of bridging theme or survey that went on between 2024 and 2028. So watch this space. I know that seems like distant future, but I find things tend to come around very quickly indeed. And Jenny also asked, she noticed that Schubert and Co. were not appearing at Spring Song, and will they be coming back? The concerts they gave were excellent. Well, thank you for that. Schubert and Co., if you didn't hear us before, is actually not specifically related to Oxford Lieder. It's related to me. It's an ensemble I founded a couple of years ago at Spring Song in 2018. Me at the piano and 8 singers, which means we can cover a lot of part songs, male voice, female voice part songs, not only Schubert, but rooted in Schubert, that are just never heard. And it's wonderful music. I'm sure some of you will know some of those part songs that you just feel he poured his heart into, and it was some of the most personal music that he wrote. But because of the forces involved, it's very, very rarely heard. And so we try and present in a kind of refreshing and fun way, and try and give voice to that repertoire. So it's not just about Oxford Leader, and I didn't want to shoehorn us into every festival and event, but yes, we will certainly be back at Oxford Leader, but we're also doing some other concerts in the autumn. We should be at the Westmoreland Festival and at Vine Hall as well in early October. So watch this space, or indeed watch our website, schubertandco.co.uk. Or are we schubertandco.com, I think, actually. Anyway, we're easily found, and I hope that you'll look forward to our future concerts. I love doing those concerts. We were up at, the last thing we did was Rydale Festival last summer. And of course our late night men only concert in the Mad Hatter at the last festival, both of which were a total joy. And I love playing that. I love the way that we do the concerts. I love the colleagues and the sense of camaraderie. So we'll definitely be doing a lot more. And Jenny's daughter also asked, if you could go back in time and meet Schubert, what would you say to him? What would you like to ask him? And actually, I haven't yet got a very good answer for that, I'm afraid. I think I might be totally tongue-tied. In fact, I think I'll try and find a way of just saying thank you on behalf of many, many people. So I think, yes, if I have any more thoughts before we finish, I might come back to that. So I've got one question, I think, come into my inbox. No, it's not a question, it's a comment. I'm just saying thanks for introducing me to Spotify and some artists' favourite recordings with some marvellous discoveries, which I absolutely agree with. And I hope if you haven't already been doing that you'll be tempted to go back. I'd say the ones in particular, Robin Tritchler, and who gave some wonderful notes accompanying his playlist for his programme. And he... I didn't actually ask him to do that. I just said, would you send through your favourite recordings? And he sent through, and he said they weren't actually necessarily his favourite recordings, but they were recordings that he really admired and took something very specific from. And he then laid those out for us very clearly, which is great. So those are still there on the day's events over this week. So do go back and have a further listen to those. So just to remind you, if you would like to ask a question, please do. I think I've answered all the questions I've received thus far that I can see. So if you've got a question, it's info@oxfordleader.co.uk. I'm not going to be here, I think, for more than about another 25 minutes or half an hour, and maybe even less if nobody does write in, because I don't just want to talk without answering anything. But so do write if you'd like to. I think you could probably tweet at us as well. Keep an eye on that too. So I was also just going to let you know that we will. Let me just check Twitter here as well. Yeah, so I'll just let you know that on either Monday or early next week, we're going to send out another email. I'm aware that we've been filling people's inboxes every day, which is not necessarily, is necessarily something that we try and avoid. We're aware that nobody wants hundreds and hundreds of emails clogging up their inboxes. But we'll send one more as a sort of farewell to Spring Song, which I hope you'll forgive us for. And one of the main reasons for that will just be also to tell you, give you a few sort of listening pointers for further ahead. It looks like we're all going to be stuck in our homes for a little bit longer still, and so I thought it might be interesting to send over a few things that I've uncovered and others have as well, for further listening. There've been some many people now posting all sorts of material online, and I don't know how many of you have had the chance to discover a lot of that, but some things that I've stumbled on that I will share with you. And we're also just thinking about other ways that we can keep people happy and engaged and give people something to do. So one of those I think we're going to offer to make sort of personalised song recordings for vulnerable people, and we'll be asking you to nominate people who might particularly welcome that. So more coming on that soon if there's any response to that. We were also wondering about maybe setting up some listening groups for people. I don't know whether there will be any uptake on that. It's something that we will, we'll send out a little bit more about our plan for that. But the idea might be that, for example, we would come up with a listening list, or we might ask one of our singers in the way that we have this week to provide a kind of a playlist that people could go away and listen to, possibly even a little online presentation from that singer or pianist as well. And then people could gather using Zoom, 4, 5 or 6 people together to talk about what they're taking away from that. So again, that would only be if there were a response to it. I think we'll also carry on posting more live recordings and any further material that we can come across as well. I've already had at least one very kind offer from one of our speakers to provide a little sort of analytical lecture on a weekly song to post, which I hope might be interesting for people. So I haven't yet seen anything else come into the inbox here. Are there songs you couldn't do? I have just had one. This is very good. Are there songs you couldn't do remotely? A song that would require too much live connection, perhaps? Yes, I think probably most songs. I think we've all chosen fairly carefully what we would record. I wouldn't want to do any of the big Strauss songs, for example, in a recording like this. They just require too much instantaneous give and take, to listening, flexibility. I suppose anything with a lot of rubato and a lot of notes, I think basically would be pretty much impossible to do. So even that Mahler, I would say, was sort of stretching it. It was just so irresistible to have Christina there outdoors with the mountain backdrop. But maybe that song was ambitious, although I think it worked perfectly well. But yes, I think the more romantic and the more complex you get. I mean, Christina was due to sing the Berg 7 early songs. I don't think want to undertake those remotely. Maybe we'll have a stab at it. Who knows? I'll ask Christina if she's up for it, and maybe we will have a go and see whether we can get through them. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted. I'll post them if we can. That was from Helen, who also asks, what's been your favourite thing about Social DistanSong as a festival? Well, I guess the simple answer to that is the feedback we've had and how much people have been enjoying it. I think it was a very, very last minute decision to do it. I mean, having to cancel Spring Song, of course, was very last minute. And I always thought immediately we would post something from us, but I didn't have this idea of doing the kind of daily post like this and asking for something from each concert until really just before we started. And so it's been a lot of work. We've definitely been flat out trying to get all the recordings made. As I say, I've been learning to use bits of new technology. I think lots and lots of artists and I guess all sorts of people have been learning about new technology this week. But I've been enjoying that, actually. I've been enjoying making learning to use iMovie and that sort of thing. But I've really just been bowled over by the response from it and how people, knowing that the songs we record are not the polished, finished product, and knowing that you don't have that sense of contact that you have in the concert hall with audiences, I didn't really know what people would make of it. And so it's been so pleasing to have emails every day from people saying how much they valued it and how much they've enjoyed it. So I've taken a lot from that, and as I've already said, I think we will definitely continue doing things like that in the future. And yes, I've enjoyed getting to know iMovie, not least because it turns out it's a fantastic thing to be able to make films with my 4-year-old boy as well. He's been really enjoying making a very elaborate film, in fact, of his new Lego spaceship. So a couple of other questions in. One I can't answer that. What is your favourite Schubert song? Totally impossible to say. I genuinely don't think there's a single Schubert song that I don't like. And that for me was the great discovery of 2014 and the Schubert project, which of course I spent a good 2 or 3 years planning and listening constantly to Schubert and just being amazed that there's not a single dud song out there. And I don't care what people say. I know that people think he had on days and off days, but I don't agree. I think he had different ambitions for different songs, and he didn't think when he wrote those endless little strophic settings of Hurlity and Klopstock and others, he wasn't thinking, I'm creating the next Erlkönig or Gretchen am Spinnrad. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was creating beautiful scenes for people to enjoy in kind of domestic music making, and to allow people to give simple expression that would to heighten the expressivity of the text and to reflect on the poem and the poetry. So not every song set out to have the dramatic impact of those great songs. They didn't set out to be great songs, so it's not a miss that they weren't. And so I really do believe, and even the very, very early songs and those great big ballads, they've all got something in them that makes them worth listening to. So I don't think, I certainly couldn't name a favourite one, but I do sometimes look back on that year with real nostalgia. Actually, I just had such pleasure putting it together and getting to know so much of his repertoire and just constantly being amazed. And I still am when I rehear songs that I've not heard for ages. It's a constant discovery, isn't it? And I think you can just see up there, you can see Graham Johnson's magnificent 3-volume Schubert Bible, which if you haven't got it and you love Schubert, it's a must have. It just such revelations in there as well, from a life spent with that composer. When and why did you set up Oxford Lieder, and why in Oxford as opposed to another city in the UK? Right, well, the second part of that is easy because I was living here at the time, and although I then went away for a long time to London in between and a brief stint in Berlin, it's always kind of been my home city, and I've been back here now for 5 years. So when kind of feeds into that. Well, I just finished as an undergraduate student at Worcester College in Oxford reading music, and I really needed to practice the piano because I hadn't done a lot of practice while I was a student, I confess. And so I was going up to London for lessons with my teacher, Michael Dusek, who then taught me at the Royal Academy of Music when I went there a year later. And I was preparing for auditions, learning to play the piano again. Well, learning to play the piano full stop, I think. In Oxford with a group of friends, and we together decided to put on a festival. We wanted to do the 3 Schubert cycles and some other Schubert recitals as well. And so we had this idea of a Lieder Festival, the Oxford Lieder Festival, and we just put it on with our friends, all students in the Holywell Music Room, and had a great response. And it's kind of gone from there. And interestingly, I recently found, in fact, maybe I'll if I can dig it out, I'll take a photo of it and post it online. I found the original brochure for that festival back in 2002. And in fact, the sort of mission statement we have on the back of it about establishing a festival for Oxford, and reinvigorating an enthusiasm for the neglected art form of song, and a commitment to bringing great artists to Oxford. There was quite a lot in there that we still stand by today, and I was really pleased because I always think, I didn't have any vision for how we were going to do this, but actually seeing back that we did from the outset, it was great to see him, and I feel like we've achieved a lot of what we set out to do, and luckily our ambition is, I guess, ever growing, and the things we realise we can do. It's been such a learning curve running the festival, that I think I now realise more and more the kind of importance of certain areas of it, I guess, and can hopefully keep things fresh and exciting through that. That's what I sincerely hope. How do you pick artists for your concerts? Well, that is interesting. There's no hard and fast answer to that in terms of how I select artists for performance in the festival. I have a lot of people just writing out of the blue, and I do read all of those emails. I have to say not many of them immediately then lead to a concert engagement, but sometimes it leads to a discussion and maybe hearing them live, listening to recordings, keeping an eye out for what they're doing, and then eventually definitely there are people who have come to us like that. I wish at the moment that I had more time to go to live concerts, to go to all the competitions as well, but I don't. But I do try and keep an eye on all of those things. I keep an eye on other halls, obviously Wickham Hall, for example, and other festivals internationally as well, and other competitions, and I see who's coming there. and I keep an eye out for them, and I try and listen online if necessary and live where possible. And then I have certain people that I trust. I guess some of the accompanists in particular, who will say, this great new singer or this fantastic person is a must-have, and I'll go and investigate a bit, and then perhaps book them. And then we have certain partnership concerts where I guess I always have a sort of veto if I don't agree that the person is of a satisfactory caliber, but by and large, that's never an issue. And so there are certain things, certain international partnerships in Heidelberg and Zeist and Barcelona, and of course with the Kathleen Ferrier Awards as well. All of those things that we have a sort of exchange of young artists, those are recommendations, I guess, in that sense. And then in terms of how we take the programs from artists as well, it's very varied. I'm constantly asking people to learn new things, but I'm also aware that some singers some very well established singers are highly unlikely to be able to take on a whole program of new works to demand. And so it's a question of either simply accepting what they do in some cases, and there are some singers where you say, I want that person at the festival. I think they are of such standing and such a caliber that I don't really care what they sing. We kind of will bend our theme somehow to fit that, and I think we usually do that quite successfully. Or we'll take a day off our theme if we have to, however it works. And some singers you can say, well, okay, this is the program you want to bring. Would you maybe include an element of this, or could you think about how to approach this aspect of our theme this year? And then some of the younger singers I feel more comfortable in saying, here's the repertoire I would like you to learn if you'd like to do this recital. And so it's a very varied approach, and of course the same putting the jigsaw of the festival together as well involves kind of constant back and forth and compromise. It's a hugely time-consuming and quite complicated process, but there isn't a kind of hard and fast method to it. Do you have any top tips for artists just starting out in their careers? That's an interesting one, and this is I'm reading this right here and now, so not having had much time to consider it. I think maybe just to, certainly for accompanists, I think to make sure that you are trying to do the very best you can every time you do it. And I think certainly the background that I came from, coming through doing my undergraduate in Oxford, and then being a pretty competent, fluent sight reader and a quick learner, I think for a long time I suffered from being able to do things quite well enough to get me through. And while you're a student, you find that you're pounced on all the time to do that. Oh, fantastic! This person, I can give them the score the day before and throw them a score for my audition or my coaching or my whatever it is tomorrow, and they can just do that, and that's great. And so you're constantly working with people, and you're learning but not really learning lots of new repertoire, and it's all very exciting. And then suddenly you realise that actually in the real world, no one wants to hear the speed at which you can learn something. It doesn't matter, no one cares. It doesn't matter if it's taken you a month or a day. If it's not good enough, it's not good enough. And I think there's certainly a kind of an Oxbridge path for that. And I think not only Oxbridge, there are others as well who come through and rely on the kind of quickness that they have and speed learning and good instincts. But actually the detail and the in-depth preparation is the main thing that you need to do. And much better to learn slightly less and say no to a few people, work with slightly fewer people, but work at a higher level. And I think that's something took me a long time to work that out. And I guess the temptation to do too much is always there as well. And actually, I guess the main time I find that is always in the festival, where I always, when else in my year do I, so there's a bit of a tangent from the question that was asked, but when else in my year do I get to do exactly what I want, with who I want, where I want, on a piano that I want? It doesn't happen that I get to make all those decisions that often. And so I'm always putting far too much playing in. And of course, then I end up being just slightly frustrated with some of my playing because I just don't have time to do that last minute study and preparation once the festival begins. And so it's something I'm getting better at. I definitely am getting better at it. but I'm not totally there yet. Anyway, so a couple more questions coming in here, which is great. Let me see. Well, someone very kindly asking how they can donate because they've been enjoying this. Well, if you're watching this on our website, then at the top of the page you'll see on the menu it says support, and if you click there, that should take you to a fairly easy way of doing that. If you have any problems with that, let us know, and we'll be delighted to send you further details. But that's extremely kind of you to mention that you might like to do that. Thank you. Well, this is interesting. Actually, this is from my father-in-law. One of the most intriguing events of the week for me was Simon Lepper's fantasy on an accompanist's theme from Vaughan Williams, his soliloquy on the last of the Songs of Travel, Sans Singer. There are many piano parts to songs which can stand on their own for their beauty and eloquence. Do you care to name any favourites? Is there room at the festival for more programming about the technicalities and musicology of what makes a great piano part? Well, interesting. I'm not sure that it was Simon Lepper's fantasy on an accompanist's theme. I believe that he just played the piano part as written. I'll go and listen to it again, but I'm fairly sure he might have added a couple of notes, but if I remember rightly, it's just the piano part. Are there piano parts that I would care to name as favourites in that sense? I don't think so. Again, I always hesitate to name favourites, particularly if I've not had a long time to think about it. I suppose Schumann is the obvious pianist-composer that springs to mind. Of course, one thinks of the playouts in Dichterliebe and so many others that I guess they would sort of immediately jump out, but I'd have to give that more thought. But the technicalities and musicology of what makes a great piano part, well, I've often thought it would be wonderful, actually, to sometimes sit down and play to an audience. And I don't have a hang-up about being an accompanist, by the way, but to play to an audience just the piano parts of songs, and then maybe just the vocal line of songs. And I think, obviously, for people who are more, whose primary focus in songs, I think we all have different approaches, but whose primary focus in songs is on the poetry, I think they would probably still take a lot from the sung line. But for those who approach it from the musical side, I think you'd find the sung line surprisingly disappointing if you listen to it without the piano. The piano is really the descriptive machine in the background. Well, not in the background, why did I say that? It's the sort of descriptive goings-on of the song. And it's where all the harmony is, and melodies are vital too, but harmonies are really crucial, and inner melodies. So there are usually lots of counter melodies going on, particularly in all the great song composers. And so I think you can enjoy most piano parts to most songs. And I'd love to sit down and play, for example, the first song of Die Schöne Müllerin with its 5 verses and ask someone just to listen to just the piano part and how a good accompanist varies that and see how much they could take away of the different shades and nuance and character without the vocal line, without the poetry. I think there would be a lot there. So maybe on the back of this question, maybe we will do something on that in the future. Maybe we'll do some kind of experimental event where we hear the piano part without the singer, or we hear the 2 parts separately and then put them together, or something like that. We'll see. But definitely, I was grateful to Simon for doing that. I think that was very would be very interesting. So Joelle says, what is your earliest memory of making chamber music? Actually, my earliest memory of making chamber music is a total disaster back at school, attempting the great B-flat major violin sonata of Mozart with a very talented violinist when I was a 6th former, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. The Adagio introduction is sort of fiddly. It has complex rhythms, and I for some reason we had one rehearsal and a lesson, and a slightly brusque, shall we say, violin teacher who really made me feel pretty terrible about it, and I just sort of gave up, and that was the end of playing with violinists for a long time. So a really bad first experience, actually. But I can remember also my my first experience of song, definitely, which was well, not quite. My first experience of the word accompanist and the idea that this could be something I could do, which was when I was at school, and there were a couple of very good singers in my year. Again, when I was at school, as a sixth former, and we're starting to play a bit, but really not aware that song was a big thing. But we would bash through some songs together, and we discovered Erlkönig, the dreaded Erlkönig, as I've already mentioned. That's one song that I now really hope I never have to play. And we had a workshop. I was at a school up in the north of England, and we had a workshop with members of Opera North. And I wish I knew who the singer was, but I have no idea, and I don't know how I could ever find out. But in the lunch break, this friend of mine and I were bashing through Erlkönig, hell for leather. Had no idea. I mean, God knows what it was like. But anyway, there we were, and we finished, and the door opened, and the singer from Opera North had been standing on the other side of the door, and we were mortified. And she walked in and said to me, "You should be an accompanist." And I said, "Never even heard the word. What's that?" She said, "Well, find out, and you should be one." And here I am. So she got that right, I think. But so that was definitely my first experience. My first experience there. So another question in from Liz, who says, "What has happened to the young singers who would have been in the masterclass? Will they have another chance?" Well, thank you for asking that. And the answer is, I hope very much they will have another chance. First of all, to reassure you that they've all been fully refunded for their course fees, which they had all paid. It was so close to the time that they had all paid their course fees. Their course fees are heavily subsidised by a number of trusts and individuals, but they still pay about £500 to be there for the week, which is about a third of what it actually costs to put them through the master course. So they've all been fully refunded, I'm pleased to say, and yes, they've all been told that they will have first refusal when we reschedule the course, hopefully in October, and if not, in spring next year. We're just a lot of discussions obviously going on about that at the moment, but they have been told they will have first refusal. If the dates work for them, they won't have to apply again. They hopefully will be able to come back. One or two of them have been before and were coming again, which was always nice to see people that enjoyed it that much that they want to come back. But yes, they will have another chance, is the simple answer to that question. Any plans to bring the Earl Kings back again? Yes, I would love to bring the Earl Kings back again. And in fact, I was chatting to Brian, their singer, not that long ago, and hoping they might come back last October, in fact, and it just didn't quite work out. They are very in demand these days. I'm pleased to say they're still going strong. Looked them up, they've got new albums and all sorts going on. But I don't know that they're in the UK very much, and I think bringing them over these days is quite a big undertaking. So it sits slightly trickily in the festival, I guess, in that it's quite an expensive thing to do, but it's not one of our kind of mainstream events. So although I think they're a very serious group in their musical approach, so that's not to suggest that they're lightweight at all. They're certainly fun, but they're not lightweight. But yes, I would like to bring them back, and I hope that we will at some point. So what has been the most challenging and or inspiring festival theme to program? That is easily answered. It was the Schubert project in 2014. It took years to prepare. I mean, I'd wanted to do it for probably 6 or 7 years, and then for those of you who are following Oxford Leader all the way back then, I think we thought of it in, well, we decided to do it in about 2009 or 10. Then we had about 2 years planning it before we announced it in 2012 at our 10th anniversary, and then we took another 2 years to do the detailed planning, and so much went into it. We realized early on that if we were going to do 3 weeks with 650 odd Schubert songs, we were going to have to do a lot more. And so then that idea of bringing Schubert's Vienna to Oxford came out of that, and I realized we were going to have chamber music, we were going to have choral music, and it's provided the model for the festival ever since, really. But devising all of that and getting to that point and tripling the number of events, tripling the budget from 1 year to the next, that took a lot of planning to know how we would do that. And as I said earlier in this conversation, looking back, it was an amazing period preparing for that, and such a buzz and constantly inspiring, and such a joy to kind of feel like I was just spending 2 years of my life with Schubert. I can't imagine anything I'd kind of like to do more in a way. So that was definitely the most inspiring and the most challenging. I guess the other side of challenging would be the year after that, when we did the poets and their songs, wasn't it? We did the kind of poet-led festival. Not to put the program together in the same way, but to try and come up with something that would live up to the Schubert project. And I think maybe the 2 years after that, I felt I wasn't disappointed in the festival. I thought they were great, and I enjoyed them, and I had fantastic feedback. But they were definitely a challenge to kind of make us feel like we had that same buzz around it. So those had a different kind of challenge to them. And yes, well, someone also just asking what was your favourite festival year, and I think that was more or less the same. Someone just saying what a pleasure it was to listen to Graham Johnson talking about Schubert and Beethoven. Well, I think I would certainly concur with that, and may perhaps ask Graham to contribute something else if we keep putting more online material up. And of course, talking as we've been a fair bit about that Schubert year in 2014 and possible Schubert projects for the future, that is something I would love to revisit with the five-part Schubert's Life and Times series that Graham did. And a lot of people asked me afterwards, why didn't you record those? And I would love to record those at some point. I think to have Graham's wisdom and insight on Schubert in particular, but everything he addresses really is always fascinating, and his endless. It's the insight coupled and the kind of intellectual rigor coupled with the emotional response to it as well, that I think sets him apart, and so it's always a joy to have him there. So I think that might be it for now. Just looking to see no more questions popping up just now, and we've been here for about an hour, so it seems like quite a good moment to wrap things up. I hope that has been interesting and enjoyable. Be very happy to do this again in the future if it has. So we'll see. Anything else, just write to us at info@oxfordleader.co.uk. And what else was I going to say to finish up? Just to say again, if those of you who joined us a little bit later, that early next week we will send out one more email following on from Social DistanSong with a number of questions really for you as to what you would like us to do while this crisis continues and while we're all at home, and looking for ways to keep enriched and artistically fed over that time. One thing would be forming some sort of listening groups, perhaps, offering some more live recording material and ongoing the things that we've been doing this week with study events and remotely recorded songs. We might do some more of that, and also the possibility of maybe making some tailor-made recordings privately and by request for any vulnerable people who you feel would particularly benefit from having something like that made for them personally. So we'll send out some questions. We won't do anything that people don't want us to do, but we want obviously to stay in touch and to reassure you again that we are planning confidently for the future. I guess we all have to keep things under review for later this year. We're obviously hoping beyond hope that we can have our festival as planned. A lot of planning has already gone into it. At the moment, that's definitely what we're intending, but as I say, we have to just keep an eye on things, and of course using this extra time that we haven't had yet because of the last minute social DistanSong, but we will now have the extra time in our schedules a little bit to plan ahead and to look, and certainly extra time for me sitting at home with no concerts at all for months and months into the future. So extra time to devote to Oxford Leader and to planning, and I think 2021 and our 20th anniversary are going to be a beneficiary of that time. So once again, thank you everybody, and I hope now that I can work out how to turn this off, and see you all soon. Stay well and stay in touch. Thanks again.